give us a taste of freedom for engaging Rasa theory as a modern performer.
Just so I know, trying to, do I just press the
right arrow?
One second. Tasting freedom. Engaging Rasa theory, aesthetics, as a modern performer. Namaste. My name is Mayuri Bhandari. I'm a performer, a figure skater, a poet, and a humanitarian. My background as an actress and dancer lies in classical and modern forms, within Indian and Western spaces, both in traditional settings as well as the commercial entertainment industry. What I find common in all these realms is the joy of performing. As a little girl raised in Jain values, I turned to my father, sitting right there, and asked, "Daddy, if I don't become a big Bollywood star, is it okay if I renounce and become a sadhvi, a Jain nun?" Although this may seem extreme, it was the motive behind the thought that was significant. I felt as if the joy of actively engaging in the world as a star and the path of detachment, the higher self, bliss of calm, were opposite ends of the spectrum, contradicting to one another. My questions are twofold. One, for the performer, is performance essentially ego-based or ego-driven? And two, as a performer, can freedom from the limited ego be experienced through the body? It is through the Natya Shastra, an ancient Indian performance text, specifically within Rasa theory, that I find this middle ground between renunciant and celebrity. My thesis is a personal investigation, an exploration, and an application of the concepts I have learned from Rasa theory. And this is what I find to be important. One, provisional universality. Actions are individual, however, emotions are universal. No two men express their anger in the same manner, but every man is susceptible to anger. Sadharikarana, a state where we forget our identities, a loss of sense of time, space, locale, and histories. Third, emotion is physical. It is embodied through limbs, gestures, and facial expressions. Four, connection, with the self, with others, and to infinity and beyond, both as a performer in performance and as an individual in the world. So art is a language that is felt through emotion. It's not really factual language, and it allows for empathy to come through. Basically, this culminates to say that becoming a better performer and becoming a better person go hand in hand. So the Natya Shastra ranges from the dates 500 BC to 500 AD. It's the oldest surviving manual encyclopedic treatise for the arts, a guide for performers and spectators, directors, and playwrights. It's attributed to sage Bharata Muni. I focus primarily on chapters 6 through 8, and the Natya Shastra states that entertainment is an effect, but not the primary goal of the arts. The goals of theater are to empower aesthetic experience, to deliver emotional rasa. So the space, the sacred space that comes for artists becomes a representation of the world, a truth of what it means to be a human. Later commentators like Abhinavagupta, they take it heavily from a spectator's perspective, the Natya Shastra. However, I look at the Natya Shastra from a performer's perspective. So what is rasa? How is it defined? Rasa literally translates to juice, taste, flavor, essence. Rasa is indescribable. It's clear to the heart, yet it's beyond words. It's something that can be compared to complete absorption, enjoyment, bhakti, trance, ecstasy, even sexual climax, but it's this idea of the loss of the self. It is that which is savor, a term used in Ayurvedic cooking to mean flavor. In the context of performance, Bharata conceives of rasa as something to be taken in and ingested, that which is relished. Like the savoring of food, it's to be thoroughly enjoyed through the body. Therefore, the core universal emotions, or the sthayi like love, mirth, sorrow, etc., are parallel to the flavors in food. The performer is like a cook, preparing, combining different spices and ingredients of emotions, and presents the meal. So basically the bhavas are raw ingredients, and when they're cooked, heated, and mixed together by the performer, as the cook, through the tools of preparation, which is gesture, costume, music, makeup, etc., all of that coming together makes it the meal. So all of these items separately are just raw ingredients. It's only when they come together that there's something to be tasted and savored. So how are the effects of the emotion enjoyed? I use an example of the plum. Basically, the core emotion is the bhava, is the sweetness in a ripe plum. Tasting that sweetness, the action of tasting, is the rasa. The means of getting that taste across, preparing it, presenting it, is abhinaya, through speech, through body, through costume and makeup. According to Bharata Muni, the experience of rasa is something that is available to all, performers and spectators. It depends on the ability of the performer and the open heart of the spectator to be able to receive that rasa. Bhavas, emotions. Emotions are physical. They lie in the body. These are the base core emotions right here, through Bharatanatyam and classical Indian dance that stems from the Natya Shastra. No core emotion is by itself. There are other causing and leading factors that surround it. So if I refer back to the cooking metaphor, there's a stem-based emotion that I can use for love, and the flavor is love. The secondary emotions are like the ingredients or the spices. So the factor can be springtime. The transitory emotion can be anxiety or anticipation of the lover. The body reaction can be perspiration and anticipation. But all together, mixing those bhavas, they lead to a meal with rasa, the taste of romantic love, for example. So this can be shown as rasa being arranged from mild to spicy. So it can be love as mere infatuation on a mild scale, and in spicy, the extreme passion. So this lends to an endless combination and possibilities of dishes and tastes, and how the performer prepares those dishes. So does the performer feel emotions? Does the cook get to taste? According to rasa theory, the performer portraying all the emotions enjoys them equally, without attachment or aversion to pleasurable or painful emotions, exploring all the facets of what it means to be a human. The performer is a witness to the feelings they experience. For example, in method acting, the performer and the character meld, which can be detrimental if they lose themselves in the character. For example, in the entertainment industry, there are sometimes suicides or issues that happen when they lose their sense of self. Rasa has a different approach. There's a distinction between the personal and the character. In addition, this exploration can lead to a growth of the performer as an individual. So why is this important for the modern performer? In the culture of the corporate entertainment industry, artists like myself struggle with the environment of enhancing the ego through performance and actors' loss of self if they can't get out of their character. So stats provided by surveys done in Australia and the US in 2015 pretty much say that 40% of performers have been diagnosed with mental illness, especially from the entertainment industry. And the main reason that they say this is because they remain a shell of who they are. So how is rasa theory being applied outside of Indian aesthetics performance in the Western context? It may not apply to every form. The reasons can vary, based on cultural context, purpose, intention of the performer. Especially with commercials, I don't know how much rasa theory would apply, but some can try. Thus far, it's only been used for acting, and I think that it can be incorporated in other performance realms. So based on the work of these three scholars, here are the benefits of rasa for the modern performer. It empowers the performer. The performer is in charge of herself. She has control over embodying her emotions. She has the ability to use and pull them at will. It requires complete focus, concentration, and full presence with the body and to be in the moment. Connection can be found through something as primal as the body. To be other characters in acting, you don't have to lose yourself or pull from personal experience. There can be authenticity, drawing from the universal. The range of expressiveness leads to becoming open for the performer to receive beyond just individual experience. This leads to a performer to become versatile, very dynamic, and not just stuck to a subjective perspective or their limited ego. The sense of self for the performer is expanded. I find that success for the performer lies in the freedom and attitude of dancing like no one's watching, combined with the presence as if there were thousands in an audience. And that together leads to rasa, or success, or freedom for the performer. So how I find this to relate to yoga is There's a stillness found in movement, and that's its beauty. There's an experience of loss of self while consciousness is nevertheless maintained. So Jessica Chastain, an Oscar-nominated Hollywood actress, says, "Whenever I'm playing a character, I always separate myself from it. For me, acting is part of feeling connected to something bigger than myself. You know, they always say when you're a kid, don't judge a person until you walk a mile in their shoes. For me, acting is doing that. It's really putting on someone else's shoes and living their life and trying to understand them. And there's no part of judgment that fits in that equation at all. But it forces me to try to reach for something bigger than I thought I was." Now, she has no connection to Rasa theory or has had any training per se in Natya Shastra, but it just goes to show the relevance of these concepts. Something stemming from 500 BC in these universal concepts, they're not just necessarily from the Natya Shastra, but they're very human things. They're outside of performance and they can be applied to so many other realms. So for the performer to go beyond the self, it really lies in the choices that the performer makes with art. And I find that a great example of embarking on selfless performance is through art activism. And the inspiration for it derives from issues bigger than the performer, societal, global. The cause is the driving factor for the performer, their motive, their truth. The purpose is conveying a message for change. And unlike the left brain, the factual newspaper information talk, art is a language that communicates through emotion. It's something that is felt. And emotion is expressed through the body. Therefore, it touches the heart and resonates through music, movement, visual, sensual means, and leads to empathy. It impacts in a different way. It's extremely powerful and inspires change within both the performer and the spectator. Art breaks through prejudices. It goes through where other things don't. And in a time when attitudes are difficult to change, we need a language that reaches through. This is a quote by Malika Sarabhai, a political activist, Indian performer, who's very well versed in this work. So this is a lifelong investigation and application. It's a very powerful concept, and as I said before, it applies beyond just performance, a very human thing. I find that there are two keys that are very, very important. Humility, not just as an individual, but a surrender to the form, to the body, away from the empirical self, away from the self-inflicted judgments and mental blocks that a performer has while performing. To cast away subjective perception that allows for the body and the senses to open and to receive and to appreciate and lead with that art. I have further questions as to intention and awareness and purpose of the performer, how this applies in traditional spaces versus modern spaces, and how this affects a female performer in the modern day and that expression of sensuality. So, performance. It's about telling stories, conveying a message, being vulnerable, connecting to yourself, to others, and something much bigger than all of us. So this can be connecting to myself as the performer, connecting to others as the audience, connecting to the divine as a human, or through my art. This is something that goes from the physical, outer to inner, transforms and goes back inner to outer. So I end with this quote from the Rishikesha, which is, "Where the hand goes, the eyes follow. Where the eyes go, the mind follows. Where the mind goes, the heart follows. And where the heart goes, there lies rasa." So are you ready to taste that rasa?
Yeah.
Thank you. So as things are being shifted around a little, I'll just give a little bit of a snippet. Basically, the Natya Shastra combines poetry, dance, music, and acting, drama, all together, and that makes it Natya, through which, again, the rest is experienced. So this piece actually is my own poetry, those are the lyrics, with some sounds, mixed with some movements from Bharatanatyam, which is one of the forms, classical forms that stems from the Natya Shastra. And the message is actually, I wouldn't say a particularly activist message by any means, but it's conveying a story. And it's my expression of the Bindi's manifestation. And it uses some aspects of the bhavas that we just saw. So through some abhinaya, through some gestures, and through going through the 8 to 9 universal emotions and expressing that through the face and the body. So that's pretty much it. And before I end, I know I'll forget this, I just want to give a really big thank you to Hiranmai, Shilpi, Ali Berger, Jack Kirkner, and I'm missing one more person. August for music. So I just want to say thank you, and we'll begin. So, thank you. And I'll take questions after. Thank you.
I see people look at me in admiration, in suspicion, as an other, or in awe. What is that dot on your head? What does it mean? People may ask out of curiosity, caution, or sheer wonder. Since I was a kid, I have found myself explaining what I knew the bindi to mean. Was it an expression of my Indianness being a female, or an awakening? Or was it consciousness peeking from my third eye, or rather, beauty over spirituality? Maybe it was all. But I did notice that generally I wore the bindi occasionally, usually just in traditional attire. Surely that was not my heart's desire. Or did it suggest that at best I was only connected with my Indian side when I expressed in that dress? However, I began to question my purpose, my intention. Did I wear the bindi simply because of heritage and glamour, for the pride that I felt when I looked in the mirror? Or did I truly feel complete when my two eyes did meet, the center of my forehead? I understood I had much to discover, and not just to apply because of tradition, habit, or a beauty cover. The dot-busters claim these Indians are a people who don't fight back. Therefore, you'll find that they're easy to attack. These dot heads are easy to tell apart. Just gaze around and you will find your mark. Stemming from jealousy, anger, and their fear of the unknown, spreads a darkness that goes beyond what one should be shown. That which is strange to another is at times hard to swallow, but must one really be so shallow as to simply degrade and hate, but not allow their self to educate? Why is it that when my mother first arrived after marriage, where she had left her country, her family, her heritage, she was advised to set aside her attire, her saris, her kurtas, her clothing of desire? She was told especially to set aside her bindi, the expression of her culture, her marriage, basically her identity. Otherwise, if she denied, she may be another target of their violent scrutiny. My mother explained suddenly her forehead felt bare. The mark she always wore was no longer there. The adornment, she says, that made her feel complete, which brought a coolness, a calmness she had to delete. The bindi brought a sense of beauty, a glow on her face, which unfortunately one cannot quite replace. Why under fear and caution must they remain, when it's okay for another to display for personal gain and fame? While to those who have worn it since birth, who feel complete and connected by its worth, feel trouble to adorn that which they have always worn, who whose expression of beliefs and culture is suppressed, while another without worry can get all dressed and not have to stress or give a second thought to the definition of the dot or what it represents? Why is it that when we apply our own bindi, it's ridiculed, degraded, another point of mockery? Yet when it's stripped of its meaning and plastered in pop culture, it's idolized and considered a creation like no other. Ironic how this external expression, which symbolizes the journey for inner progression, can be used in the exact opposite form, just to attract attention in the physical norm. For some, it may be a display of mere decoration, an addition to jewelry, attire, or pure adoration. But there is a history and a layer beyond that of fashion, which roots to an expression of detachment from passion. I may not possess a mirror, but can I wear it without vanity? And when I look and see it on another, that becomes my point of reflection. A simple interaction like no other. I acknowledge I see you, and you see me. Compassion for another, a complete stranger, as a loved one would be. I now see all of that in the bindi. I smile at myself as I apply the final touch of the bindi with my finger when I look in the mirror. For me, its meaning is ever evolving. There may be no perfect way of truly knowing, but the significance is to allow my soul to keep growing. The bindi is meant to have me question the intention behind my every action, to share, embrace, and appreciate, not appropriate. For me, the bindi is a reminder of inward reflection, and not just a sticker of external decoration.
Right in front of me. So very special for me. Of course, thank you to my family and friends and everybody and all of our teachers. Anna, Mugdatai, Chris, who's not here. But yeah, so any questions? Maybe you forgot him, and that's fine. Yes?
When you mentioned that in movement we can have stillness, do you mean like inner stillness, or how do you?
Yeah, I think that movement is inevitable. As long as you're breathing, as long as you're living, there is movement, even if you're still body-wise, the cells are moving. So absolutely, when I talk about the inner stillness, I think, yes, you may be standing still, but if you're moving in any way or even standing, there's the inner stillness that develops. So basically, if you're able to clear these self-judgments, these mental blocks, thoughts, vrittis, as they're mentioned even, whether good or bad, and it's also mentioned in the Natya Shastra, that it allows for the clarity of something more than yourself to come through, or you to connect with something more than yourself. And that may not be as much as spiritual talk, or just real talk of being clear with your mind. So to answer your question, yes, the inner stillness, cultivating that inner stillness, a calm of the mind and the thoughts.
Wait, I just have a suggestion that you may want to look at the work of Bhatta Lunlata, this scholar from Kashmir.
Yes,
Have you?
Yeah, the problem is with this thesis, I had like, you can ask Anna, you can ask Al, you can ask these, I had like 3 different things going on, and so I had to cut a lot of Lodata, Abhinavagupta, like I was exploring a lot more, but I would love to hear what you have to say.
No, because he identifies the locus of rasa in the idea of the writer. So, and I think that is very important.
Okay.
So, I think that is very important. 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 So, I think that is very And it is not the performer, not even the audience, but it is the writer, and the locus of the rasa is the idea itself. So the performer is kind of like secondary to rasa
Correct.
experience.
Right.
You see, so and knowing that rasa exists in the idea, and that knowledge itself can maybe create that awareness or that distancing from the act within the performer.
Yeah, I mean, Abhinavagupta and so many others talk about the body, the performer being a vehicle.
Right.
The
Yeah,
vehicle.
exactly, right?
And so that's why I look at it and I acknowledge that. I was seeing so much from the spectator's perspective, or the rasa being given from the spectators. That's why I wanted to know. So not to say that the power lies, it's in this in-between, the idea, as you say. Not with spectator, not with performer, this in-between space that is cultivated in this environment. And so I definitely agree. I don't mean to say that the power is with the performer by any means. I say that the individual has a power to recognize that power, and not that it lies with, I think the performer is a part of it, just like all the ingredients, part of the cooking. I think it's just it's a way through which we can connect by observing that. And so what does the performer feel? What does the performer go through? This is just things that I'm exploring because I'm applying it to me.
Sure,
So.
sure.
Thank you. Yes.
So thank you so much for inviting me for today.
Thank
So
you.
that was very special. One thing that I kept on thinking about during your entire presentation was actually athletes and athletics and sports.
Yes.
How
Yes.
a lot of athletes, like, they call it the zone, when they're doing said sport and they're just, the world disappears around them, but they're just one by themselves. And I'm just wondering if you would actually extend your interpretation into sports as well.
I'm so glad you asked that, because
Yeah.
as Ali said last time, if I had a plant, that would have been it. Yeah, I actually wanted to include that part in here as well, that it's in a very extremely competitive environment in sports.
Yeah.
It can be, depending, because I'm a figure skater, so I come from a rhythmic, artistic sports background. But there's this idea about winning and losing. So they say, how can these ideas, they're okay for dance and performance, but how can you apply it in a very competitive environment? And so they talk about, you're absolutely right, they talk about the zone. And they use it as, like, not all of the people, but I think if they have this mentality of, like, it's just my body, let me just keep pushing myself, I'm in that place. And I think that these principles are so powerful that they can actually make the performance of the sport, of the athlete even better. Actually, the success rate is even higher. And an example of that is the Golden State Warriors. They went from 13th place to 1st place in one season because of applying these yoga principles. And they mention actually what those 4 yoga principles are. So I think that it really can, actually people question, well, can these really be applied in a place where, it's really, 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 really high up there, and it's, we've got to win here. It's not just a performance.
Right.
And I think that actually makes you even stronger. And a better person, like I said, better performer, better person.
And I'm also remembering basketball coach Phil Jackson, who coached the championship Bulls and the championship Lakers.
Exactly.
He made his athletes do meditation, and it wasn't about winning and losing. It was just pulling out the best out of yourself.
Exactly. The purpose is it's not exactly, the objective is not to succeed for whatever success means, but to just be in joy and community and just do it the best that you can without thinking about that end goal in that way.
Right.
So
We have time for one more question.
I got 2 hands.
Who's first?
Alba?
Thank you so much. That was amazing. It also came to my mind the state of flow. He was saying, because I come from the Western mind background, and we study a lot emotions in a different way, I would say. And there's a lot of research about this neuroscience and all that. So this theory opens a whole new perspective for me. So I want to thank you for that, because it's very, very interesting. And also, I wanted to point out, and when you were talking about the art activism, I also wanted to emphasize that I think there is a lot of potential there.
Yes.
Because usually when people go more for arts or entertainment, I think that our mindset is more open, or we really are more, experience more the feelings that just if we are intellectualizing, or because usually we have fun too with art, right? Or we go to see a performance to have a good time. So I see on that a lot of power, and especially in Indian dance and some, just to make it short, like I see a lot of potential. So thank you so much to share with us.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will address your question afterwards. So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So in this way, we conclude our third year of this graduate colloquium. Please help me congratulate this third generation. They are becoming, together with the previous generations and the generations to come, sources and resources of healing and transformation and a new wave of yoga. So, congratulations.
Yeah.